all the way. And if they're not nominated, that's really scary. So I enjoyed this film. I think this film is great. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Don't watch it just because it's Black History Month. Watch it because actually this is a part of American history,
For sure.
right? What this guy did and what happened to him. And so they put up the title cards at the end to let you know what happened to these guys afterwards. And I won't spoil that for you. You just got to watch it and see what happened to each of these guys many years after, in this case, how they're seen and how they were both seen in completely two different lights, even though they were two different responses to the situation that they were in. So, wow. HBO Max, you may not have hit it with Wonder Woman, but they hit it with this one. So, Johnny, what have you seen, man? Or what do you think? And then you can tell me what you've seen.
Well, I've been watching Snowfall on Hulu. It was under the Black Stories. So dug into that a little bit for this week specifically, and have to say, absolutely blown away by the show. So Snowfall takes a look at all of the major players involved in cocaine taking over the streets of LA in the early 1980s. And one thing that I absolutely love is they do not fall prey to all the gimmicks with all the nostalgic placements of brands and everything. That makes such a big difference. It has all the feel of the early 1980s. It looks like the 80s. You don't have all the polish that we are used to today. But what's even better is the relationships that you see developing feel much more like the 1980s. People are out in their yards all the time. You just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, having grown up through the 80s, it looks and feels exactly like it used to be. People were engaging each other, talking across yards and walking around the neighborhoods. Very different feel. It definitely captures that well. And I have to say that in particular, looking at the black neighborhood in the show, it gives you a really excellent look at that aspect. So the other groups that are involved, you definitely have some great characters in there, but it really is focused on the black neighborhoods more, and that makes it a very powerful show. Honestly, so the main character is a young teenage black boy that is working with his uncle selling marijuana and gets pulled into selling cocaine. And he's brilliant. He's cool. He will face down anything and take the chance, you know. And he proves himself to some very dangerous people by not being afraid of them. And he just, it's like, okay, here I am. Are you going to sell to me or not? Are you going to buy from me or not? Because if you do, I'll be back tomorrow. And I love that attitude. It's a really interesting look because everybody else around him is going, no, I don't want this. You got to stay away from that. Stay away from me. Don't bring that here. And he just charges forward. So I'm really interested to see where the show goes. But even the first few episodes, phenomenal.
Okay. Wow. Got me wanting to take a look at that. So I that is good because I think what we see in some of these films is that you have these people who have these variables, the environment around them, and what you see is an entrepreneurial spirit coming out. It's just pointing at the wrong things. It's using the wrong variables. So that's the fun thing to watch, to see how do they sharpen skills, maybe doing something that isn't good, but to turn it and use it for something better. So I'd love to see if that season goes on, if it does that, if it tries to show you.
It will be really interesting. And I will add there are multiple layers surrounding just this one character. He's got the example of his dad who's on the streets,
Oh, wow.
and he doesn't want to connect with his own dad.
Wow,
He's
yeah.
working with his uncle. So it's really interesting. I'm dying to see where that goes.
Snowfall, definitely got that down. I'm gonna have to check that out for sure. What you know? What series? What streaming program it's
It's
on?
on
or
FX,
platform?
FX and Hulu.
Yep.
FX and Hulu. Perfect. All right. Well, that's easy enough for me. K-Zach, what have you been watching lately?
All right, so I've been holding off on this one, and I'm glad I did for this particular week.
Okay.
Because I thought this was a really great documentary, and it's called Horror Noir: A History of Black Horror.
Okay.
It takes a look at a really just kind of rich history of black and African Americans and people in horror. It takes kind of a really kind of an academic look because it's based on the book by a doctor. It also takes a look at the impact of a lot of the films. Like, you would have never guessed Blackula had such an impact on black culture, but I mean, this is absolutely a black vampire played by a phenomenal actor with a black director. Working in the studio that really doesn't really just cares about money, but these guys care about the story, and they were going to call it Count Brown Comes to Town. It's like, no, we're not going to do that. So they take ownership of this film and really kind of push the whole narrative. And the performance from the main actor, which the name escapes me at the moment, but it's better than the film deserves. And they talk about that. And then they talk about, the impact of, First to Die, or the Sacrificial, or the Magic Negro, things like that. And you get luminaries like Keith David, and you get luminaries like Ken Foray. You also get folks like the directors of Tales from the Hood and things like that, coming in and giving their viewpoint and their aspect on how just important these films were. And you get to talk about the importance of Jordan Peele winning that Oscar for Get Out and things like that. And you get conversations with him about it, and just it's a huge impact in film history, period. Because you have Scream, Blackula Scream, which again a sequel, but it's the first starring role for Pam Grier. She's not a sex symbol in the film. She's a woman who knows what she's doing. She's a woman. She's capable. She's smart, and it's amazing to see just the impact of these actors and these directors, and just what horror means to the community. Because, like I said, it's something that's dealt with every day. But I mean, these guys really just push the point forward, and you get just a wonderful academic look at horror movies and horror in general, and just from what it became to what it is now. And it's just a great kind of pantheon of everything. So check that out on Shudder. If you have the Shudder series, you'll also get extended interviews with folks like Rachel True from The Craft. You'll get a great conversation between Ken Foray and David Keith, or David Keith or Keith David. I always Keith
Yeah.
David. So,
Yeah, I do that too.
they live in things like that. You get just great conversations with these folks, and just it's a phenomenal thing that Shudder did. So do check that out if you have it.
Yeah, no, I think that's good because horror movies. When you think about horror films, these are highly lucrative films because they're made with such a low budget.
Exactly, and that was the thing. Like, you take a look at the Samuel R. Coffey American International films, things like that. These were films that were just being cranked out to make money. Like, they'd go into small neighborhoods, neighborhood theaters, play for 2 weeks and go away. And then they talk about, like I said, not necessarily making original films, but taking concepts and then just putting a black twist on them. Because Blackula creates Blackenstein and Dr. Blackenstein and things like that. And Abby, which was a knockoff of the Exorcist and things like that. Films that just went in there to make money and then went away. And that's a huge thing, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that when I talk about one of the films today. So,
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and we should just to the viewers who are watching here today, whoops. The thing that you will see is that when you talk about creation of movies, you should be able to look at everything, because you can creativity can come from anywhere, and especially if it's coming from a group that's been held down or oppressed, they're going to have some wonderful stories to tell, because most of those stories are going to be about freedom and breaking through and liberation, which people should never get sick and tired of that. So
yeah, absolutely. One of the best conversations is between Keith and Ken, and they talk about the impact of Night of the Living Dead and seeing, okay, Ben making it to the end and then having him torn away. And there's a great story in there about George Romero is driving the film cans for Night of the Living Dead into New York, I think from Pittsburgh.
okay,
And while he's driving, the news comes on the air that Martin Luther King has been shot.
Yeah.
So you're getting that. So I mean, you're carrying one of the most important films of the 20th century with a black actor in the lead, and and they have to know absolutely what they have is the fact that you have this wonderful metaphor, which wasn't even intentional. It was just basically that actor was the best actor to show up for this film. And it's perfect, and it's a really wonderful kind of narrative that springs out of that. And I mean, and again, that's one of the great stories that comes from this documentary.
yeah. See, and there's a lot of great stories and a lot of great documentaries that are out there right now. You can do a black cinema, you can do black music, you can do the effective gospel, black churches. There's a whole bunch of things that, quite frankly, because in school we don't get taught that history much at all. I mean, I know for me in school, it was Malcolm X is the bad black guy, Martin Luther King Jr. is the good black guy, and somewhere in there we may have read about Booker T. Washington, but not much. And we may have talked about Frederick Douglass, but not much. But everything else is all from a perspective of the winners, and these guys win, so we need to shove these guys down your throat. And it's like, well, these guys were also winners. It's just that you didn't give them the light of day. You didn't give them the same platform, the same opportunity to tell their stories. And so now what you see with the internet now as well, and some of the things that even happened last year in 2020, these stories are now getting out, and people are finding out that, there's a lot of more Black Panthers out there than you think, and they're not from the political party, right? There's a lot of superhero people. There are a lot of people who did some really great things, and how they kept their crap together at a time where they were being, oppressed is probably one of the things to me. The indomitable spirit that says, I keep fighting, I keep pushing, I keep going. You have to admire that when you see these filmmakers try to capsulate that and put that on there. So with that, why don't we just jump right into our main topic of the day? And the first part of that topic is we're going to talk about the best Black directors. And these are probably directors who probably maybe just did some films that we liked. And then we ended up discovering the director because the film was really good. So, Johnny, we'll start with you. And we'll go around the room. So I know we can do them both together because there's not as much, but we'll go around the room. So, John, who's your first set of directors that really caught your eye?
For me, it's the Hughes brothers.
Okay, tell me about
that. I'm a big action film guy. I love action films. So I didn't really know much about the Hughes brothers, to be honest. I don't really dig into directors very often. So to find out that the Hughes brothers were linked to some of the films that I actually really enjoy was actually really eye-opening for me. So a couple of the ones that I have seen are we got From Hell and the Book of Eli. The Book of Eli, just phenomenal. If you don't agree, stop watching. I'm kidding. From Hell got a lot of negative attention for a few little things. I understand that the writer of the story in the first place kind of went after them for not staying true to his version of the story. It happens so often. And God, I mean, let's be honest. Here I am on a movie review show, and I don't know very much about directors. Pretty sure the writers probably don't know a whole lot about making movies either. So there's always going to be some of those conflicts. But still, not a bad movie.
No.
Not one of my favorites.
Okay.
But the Book of Eli, my God.
Yeah.
The tone of it, the confidence. That's kind of an amazing story in and of itself. And as we're talking today about Black History Month, Denzel's awesome there. He's just got a supernatural confidence about him as he goes through that story and overcomes everything.
Yeah. No, I mean, no. So to that, back up a half step. Yeah, when these writers talk about these things, they have to understand that when you write, you can write endlessly about something. But when you're doing a movie, you have to condense it down to an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, unless you're, something else and you do 2 hours and 30 minutes, which, we won't talk about that. And so a writer has to understand that, yeah, you can write pages and pages and pages in a book or on a script or a screenplay, but the directors have to say, well, how do we make this make sense and condense it and stick to the message that we're trying to go through? What's the arc here of these characters and what they're trying to do? So, yeah, writers need to chill out about that unless they completely take your character and flip it and make it something it never was.
Right.
Then you could say, well, why did you need me if you were just going to make this character something else? So I think, yeah, in films, I find that very funny when sometimes people get upset over the liberties that a director has to take. Because it's like, listen, he's dealing with the time frame and he's shot so much footage. Yeah. And it's about, the movies are made in the editing room, right? Because it's what you keep, right? What would you say, K.
Right.
Jack?
Yeah. The Hughes brothers, like I said, they come out of the box huge with Menace to Society.
Yep.
Yes.
Just
Lorenz Tate. They discovered Lorenz Tate.
Yeah. And, you've got Jada Pinkett, Samuel Jackson again. Just a really fantastic look at gangs and gang warfare and growing up, and that, like I said, they come right out the box of that. And of course, From Hell, a really wonderful, stylized, just fantastic, based on a graphic novel. Look at the Jack the Ripper killings. I haven't seen Book of Eli. It's just one that's kind of keeps on missing me.
Oh, you got to watch
Everyone tells me keep on looking at it. But yeah, I mean, the Hughes brothers, it's amazing for them to come out the box and then, come out with, some really strong projects that have really, kind of just told different stories and things like that you're not necessarily getting, because they're telling, original stories with some really masterful filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even their story of how they got into making films is fascinating.
Yeah.
I love it. They started out small and discovered that they had a real passion for creating film. And to work together on all of them. They've got a good vision. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you can cast Denzel Washington in one of your films, right? Because that's part of it. There's the writing, there's the directing, but there's also the casting. And if you get the wrong person to try to carry a lead, you can sink a movie, right? But getting Denzel Washington to play, in the movie The Book of Eli, and I love just the idea that it's a post-apocalyptic. The film was kind of washed to that degree where it wasn't bright colors, so that you could get a sense of how distraught and dystopian that world was that he was in. And then the twist is just genius, which I won't spoil, but you should have seen it, but I won't say the twist. But I think if you understand that Denzel Washington can carry movies, this goes in that list of movies that he carries for sure.
No doubt.
And then for the Hughes brothers to stay out of his way and let him do what he needs to do and not micromanage him, that's smart. Not every director knows how to do that.
Yeah. And as far as the action aspect of it goes, you can see a really excellent evolution in their understanding of action and violence in their movies. They do it so well.
Nice.
They really do. So
yeah, it tells a story. KZ?
All right. So my first director that I want to bring to the table is Jordan Peele. Since we were talking about horror, I definitely want to talk about, kind of the new voice in horror today. Jordan Peele, who, he's an actor, he's a comedian, but I mean, you watch a bunch of those Key and Peele sketches, and there's a horror bent to those. He really kind of understands, the genre and the impact of this whole thing called horror, and so he comes in and right out of the box, his first directorial film, he writes and directs Get Out, which is just amazing because it is panic inducing all the way through, every bit of it, claustrophobia, falling, and of course, something that they talk about in horror noir is that you're going through the whole thing like, okay, there's got to be someone who's going to save him. There's got to be someone who's going to help him, and there is no one coming. Mm-hmm. There are no good white people in this film, none. Mm-hmm. And once you realize that and you hit that twist, it drops you, and because you've been so induced to believe in these tropes and things like that hey, this is coming. It ain't coming. And you see that last moment, and you see those red and blue lights flashing, and you're going, this is done. And there was an ending with, this could end in disaster, it could end in shadows, could end in arrest. No, it ends with them being rescued. And it's something you don't see coming. And that's the great thing about Get Out, is that you don't see anything coming in this film. It's just original and it's beautiful. And for him to have won the Oscar for writing for this film speaks volumes, not only just for horror, but for him coming out of the box, because he's just got, a wonderful kind of a bent sense of direction and humor. Because I mean, you come to his second film, Us, which Lupita Nyong'o is just jaw-dropping in this film. The performance, because she's giving two performances, is just amazing, and the pacing of the film is just dynamic, and you get, like I said, you kind of get the Twilight Zone twist, and it's a little predictable in what comes, but by the same token, it's just something original, and it's great to see, like I said, original horror come back. And you're getting, character, and you're getting a rich understanding of experience and people who need to be seen and things like that. And for a guy who is just doing skits and jokes on Man TV and
comedian
like
practically
to come into his own as a master of the horror genre, because now his Monkey Paw, I know he's developing two big remakes, which is the new Candyman film, which is on the way, and according to Wikipedia, he's also signed to do a remake of The People Under the Stairs, which is a hugely impactful horror film. So like I said, it's great to see, like I said, studios take note of just what impact original horror films can have. Give voices that aren't being heard a range, an opportunity to be heard. And like I said, once you see Get Out, you go, okay, the horror is in good hands, and it's in proper hands.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, when you think about it, that's creativity should come from a lot of places. It shouldn't come from just one brand, one monolithic type view of the world. It should come from many different spots, and that's what's intriguing. That's what we need. And as much as we consume media today, we need the different voices. We need to hear some things, and then I think Hollywood then will have to wake up, because we can talk about a whole bunch of things that, in terms of Hollywood here on this one, and where a place that's supposed to be so liberal, actually ends up being part of some of the problem and part of the machine that says, I'm going to continue to oppress people. And that would be, if you think about George Lucas and the trouble he went through just trying to get Red Tails made. Right? Because he was basically told, well, nobody's going to care about that. That's an American thing. Nobody's going to care about these Tuskegee Airmen. It's like, really? Well, so everybody cares about the Jews and all the Jewish films that we get made every year that we have to sit through and watch, the pianists, all this stuff. If that's okay, and people can relate to that, then I think people would love to hear about the Tuskegee Airmen of 332, right? Because these guys were heroes, and that's what most of these movies today are about. They're about heroes, or mostly people doing heroic things, or anti-heroes, right?
Not every film needs to be 12 Years a Slave.
Thank you. Yeah, and every film doesn't need to be, some gang banging movie all the time either. So I'm excited to say, let's see some of these different voices come out. And so
Right.
with that, I had to on my list. I picked two different. I went two different ways. I went OG, and then I went a new G. Right, and so OG style. I went with Oscar Michaud, and this is pretty interesting because this is a man who this is his rap sheet. Okay, this is a guy who wrote several books. Right? This guy's. Well, let me back up for a half second. So this guy is born January 2nd, 1884. So he's dead in the middle of all this, all the stuff that was going on back then at that time. And this man wrote 44 different films. He wrote, produced, directed, and then got distribution for at a time when black men didn't have much at all. In fact, his first film was in 1919 called Homestead, 1919, which is just 4 years after D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which was a KKK propaganda film, which the first time you see black people on film, and this is silent movies, is that they're the step it and fetch it character. They're the ones with the black face, and they're ignorant, and they're dumb, and they're stupid. And so Oscar, at a time we get him killed to do this stuff, said, no, that's not how I want my people portrayed on TV, so on the screen. So I'm going to make my own movies. I'm going to make them. I'm going to write them. I'm going to produce them. I'm going to direct them, and I'm going to find distribution for them. And he did 44 of them before he died in March of 1951. So this guy was a czar. He's a black czar, if you will, because imagine what he had to push through just to get these films out. And first of all, when he first started, films didn't even have sound. So that's a challenge. You're trying to tell a story without sound about a group of people that people don't supposedly care about because they're just our slaves and they're just our people, right? And he goes and pushes through and does this anyway. So this guy was incredibly a hard worker. He was a man of huge stature, too. He was a very big man. And he was born in Metropolis, just like Superman is from Metropolis, right? So you want that superhero angle. So Oscar Michaud comes in, and again, it's that same spirit that you talked about, Johnny. He was like, really? F you. I can do this.
Yep.
And what's more, I'm going to do this. And you can do what you want to do, and you can portray us however you want to. I'm going to make sure the right portrayal gets out there. So several books later, books and movies this guy's doing. Wow. That's an OG to me.
Yeah.
So when I read about him, and in fact, it was interesting because I didn't know, when I was thinking about black cinema, I always start with somewhere around maybe Spike Lee, and I'll talk about that later. But I didn't realize that there was black cinema in the 20s, in the 30s. I didn't, and that's because we never got to see these films, and most of these films aren't out there.
I was going to ask how many of them still exist, because I was doing a little bit of research on this as well.
Yeah.
And it looks like a lot of those films from that time don't exist anymore.
That's true.
So how do we recover that knowledge?
Yeah. Now there's
and that's the thing about early film is the fact that it's degradable. I mean, if you don't preserve it, it goes away. That's a really kind of weird thing. It's a fading art form. Pre-digital.
Yeah. And then what's great is I think some of this, there's a company or a group called Reel, REEL, Black. And what they did is they went and found these old films. So like Within Our Gates, The Homestead, Body and Soul, The Exile. They went and Lying Lips. They went and restored some of these. So you can find some of them on YouTube, but they'll test your cinephileness, if you will, because it is choppy. It doesn't have the best CGI, obviously. And in some of these films, there's no sound. So you really have to just focus on just what you're watching. If you really are a cinephile, then you have to be ready for that on some of these films, because it's not going to be there like the way we're used to, what we're accustomed to. But I just think it's an incredible thing that this guy, and then he was able to make these movies. He didn't get killed. That was amazing. The fact that he was able to distribute and make some money, do this sort of thing. So very excited about that. Johnny, who else is in your vision that you had discovered?
Okay, so as I said, I don't really know a whole lot of the directors of any films. So I realize that a lot of people out there watching us also don't know these types of things. So I started digging around and decided to find somebody that I wanted to learn about. And the person I came up with is Dee Reese. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's pretty fascinating. I'm really interested in her films. I have not watched any of them, but I'm going to. What I really think is interesting from what I've seen in interviews and some reviews of her films, she has a really, truly authentic look at characters and relationships. And that's something I love as much as I love action films. I also love really intense drama and people. You have to have tension in a film.
Yes.
There has to be something that's resolved. If it's not, it's boring. Honestly, life is full of tension, and from what I'm understanding about Dee Reese, she captures that really, really well. So a couple of things about her: she's black, she's a lesbian apparently, but what I'm really interested in is the fact that she studied under Spike Lee at NYU. So
wow.
From what I understand, she's really going to be one of the ones to watch, carrying the torch from him with her own spin on things. So one of the films that she's directed that has gotten a lot of attention is Pariah.
Okay.
I have to admit I don't know a lot about it, but that's the one I'm going to watch first because it got serious attention.
Yeah.
So the other one that is very interesting to me, I have not seen it, but I was looking at watching it prior to this, is Mudbound. And so in that one, from what I understand, it's after war, and you have very poor people in the South, a white soldier and a black soldier both returning home, not fitting in anywhere, and connecting with each other to help each other with PTSD and other issues after the war, and seeing that they have more in common with each other. Funny enough, saw an interesting quote on my way over here this morning that the blood is thicker than water is actually shortened, and it's actually blood on the battlefield is thicker than the water of the womb. So it's actually a complete flip of what it was supposed to mean.
Okay.
Meaning the blood you share through shared trauma, through shared experience, etc., is stronger than the water of the womb from your family. So,
wow,
definitely tied in well with that.
I think I saw an ad for Mudbound. Wasn't it? Was it a series, or was it? But I think it was either Netflix.
It is on Netflix.
Netflix, yeah. And I remember it was on my catalog of movies I need to watch, which I've got so many at this stage of the game, and so little time, but some great creative works that are out there. So, yeah, no, and I'm glad that you brought her up and brought up Pariah. I think that was one that I'd heard about before, and I heard good things about it as well. So, again, we got to support these up and coming directors, because they're going to be the people who will be, if they continue with the same tenacity that it took them to get there, then we can only imagine the Spielbergness coming out of some of these folks, and the Lucas coming out of them, and the Scorsese and all that stuff, but from their style, not a copy of someone else's. So
we definitely need more of that.
Yeah, I definitely want to see
do.
Yeah.
Okay, Zach.
All right. So the second director that I chose was, I think, was really one of the formulaic directors of the 80s, and that's Robert Townsend.
Yeah.
I mean, going to his filmography, he released some of the most important films in the 80s and 90s, because I mean, you start out with Hollywood Shuffle,
Yes.
which it's
Hilarious.
a film and it's a film that, like I said, I say that he was Kevin Smith before there was Kevin Smith, because he finances this whole thing. You know, he's
on
maxing
his
out
American
credit-
Express card. Yeah.
he's maxing out credit cards. He's doing everything. You know, selling blood and things like that to get this film made. And it's one of the most amazing satires of Hollywood I've ever
It
seen.
is.
Just period. Because-
Hollywood Shuffle. Yes.
Yeah, and what I was talking about in, you know, some of those films that were just made to make money, well, like I said, it kind of takes a look at that stereotype and flips it on its head, because like these are the films that, you know, like I said, it's just the only people working at that time were people doing, you know, pimps and hustlers and things like that, and it's just no, they're you know, tremendously talented actors who were not getting work because there isn't work to get.
Yes.
And Robert Townsend takes upon himself to make a film that gets that, you know, that provides a film with heart, provides a film with satire, just and takes on Hollywood as it is, challenges it, and makes a phenomenal film.
Oh my gosh.
And he goes from there to make The Five Heartbeats.
Yeah.
Which is still a great musical.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you can say what you will about That Thing You Do, which is a fine film in and of itself.
Yep.
But this is the story of, you know, Motown groups and what happens to them, you know, and after, you know, big success, and suddenly the 70s come along and you have to change and format and things like that, and you're going through lineup changes and you're going through, you know, drug addiction and heartbreak. Just, it's an amazing wonderful telling of, you know, music in that time.
Yes.
And it's co-written by Keenan Ivory Wayans, which, you know, like I said, that's
Living Color.
That's the jumping point for you know, great satires like I'm Gonna Get You Sucker and Living Color and things like that. So, you know, Townsend is helping launch that. He also releases Eddie Murphy Raw, which is, you know, the definitive stand-up concert film in the 80s. You know, you have a great little segment at the beginning, and you have Eddie just as he is. And finally, you get the Meteor Man, the first black superhero on screen. I mean, it's just, I mean, like I said, this is a full-length comedy superhero film, and it's, you know, him telling an original story. You know, he even gets a Marvel issue Marvel Comics run with this character. It's important because, again, like I said, it's history as it's being seen. I will admit it's not one of my favorite superhero films, but it's still important.
Mine either. But yeah.
But it's so important for the history because, yeah, this is a film about, you know, an urban hero, and, you know, like I said. And you know, like I said, you get a launching pad for things like Blank Man and things like that, which, like I said, not great films, but still important in the historical context.
Yeah.
And like I said, Robert Townsend goes on to make some really successful stuff. And like I said, those are just kind of four things that just kind of push forth the narrative. So like I said, he's kind of that first venturing out there with what he's doing.
Yeah.
And that's why his story's so important.
Yeah, and when you're willing to invest, again, because he did that first movie, Hollywood Shuffle, which I'm going to tell everybody, you have to watch this movie because it's funny. It's absolutely hilarious, you know, in this film. And in fact, we used to quote it a lot because it was so funny. Because he's just right there. Like for us, what we're doing here, we're doing reviews, and he has this thing called Black Movie Critics. And it was called Sneaking Into the Movies. Yeah. And so they sneak into the movies and they watch these films, and just watching their reactions like, no, man, that's bullshit. That wouldn't happen. It was, what was it called? Chicago Jones. It was the knockoff of Indiana Jones, and they showed them sitting there watching it, and just their reactions are so real. Like they're Beavis and Butthead before Beavis and Butthead,
right?
But with, you know, with that style of the urban flavor to it.
Yeah, because it's little sketches and things like that it lace in, but it's done so strongly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, then they have this thing called Black Acting School. It's hilarious. So they have a white instructor teaching black actors how to act black, and that whole juxtaposition is hilarious. And so they show this kid, and he's up there. He goes, "All right, you go." And the guy goes, "Jive, turkey, mother, suck." He goes, "No, man." The white guy walks. He goes, "That's not how you do it. You come in and go, look, jive." And he goes, all these sorts of stuff. And they're all like, "Oh, take it off." So, I mean, it's just the idea that this comes making something that's painful funny, and it really is funny, and you're laughing the whole way through. So if you haven't seen it, You have to see, and then of course the movie has heart.
Yeah.
Because then he's saying,
Right.
"Hey,
It's his
I wanna be
story as
great."
an actor and what he's up against
Absolutely.
in that time. Because again, these films weren't getting made, man.
No, they weren't getting made, though.
No, they aren't. You had a bunch of jackass white saviors that just like you're getting. I mean, it's when they take a chance on Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours and things like that. You're finally getting
Yeah.
This is marketable. This is valuable, man.
Yeah, no, he did a TV show for a while too. It was on the WB called Parenthood, and that was pretty good. Him playing the dad role. So Robert Townsend is an immensely smart guy, also very funny, and I love the fact that he was willing to put his last dollar to get these films started. And so because of that, he was able to get this stuff started. And so Keenan Ivory Wayans, the Wayans brothers, because of these movies, you ended up getting In Living Color on TV, and then you got to see these guys more. And then of course you get to meet Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey comes through In Living Color. J-Lo is one of the dancers on the show, and so she ends up becoming who she is, and then also an actress. So this is the genesis. A lot of this stuff was breaking ground what Robert Townsend did, and he did it with humor. Like he wasn't doing it with anger or frustration, which he easily could have done and could have been just as justified. But he uses just the humor and the absurd and the flipping of things, and it's So I'm glad you brought him up because that's a good time. In fact, I want to watch that movie again because it's a good time. You're just gonna laugh and enjoy it, but at the same time also recognize that the message is serious and it doesn't detract from that. So I love that very well. My number 2 is I wanted to go. So since I went old school with Oscar, I wanted to go new school, and so I went with Ava DuVernay because she has produced in the shortest amount of time that I've known of her some incredible films. I mean, she did Selma, so we got the first movie in a long time, by the way, of Martin Luther King Jr. This is surprising. Malcolm X got a movie before MLK. There's been TV movies about MLK and shorts and things like that, but on the big screen, a movie dedicated to just MLK, that hadn't happened. And so that's Selma. And that whole march across Roman Prentice Bridge, her getting Daniel Oyolaway, another Brit who can speak like a Southern Baptist pastor. She directs him well. She doesn't hide from the fact of the infidelity that Martin Luther King Jr. was also mentioned to say that he had partaken in, and they deal with his wife as well, talking about that, the great Mrs. King Coretta, right? And so she's done that. Then she did, so if that was enough, after doing a feature-length film, then she does a documentary, Netflix, 13th, about the 13th Amendment and what that really means and what was underlining the 13th Amendment. And what's interesting about this is documentaries can be pretty dry, right? Because sometimes it's just all about here's the data, and we're going to put it in front of you. Well, she gives you the data. She gives you these great talking heads who are psychologists in all these different fields and teachers and professors, but she doesn't choose to shoot them just sitting in front of books. She takes them to different places and shoots them, like an empty building. Like she shoots Angela Davis in an empty building and just kind of pans and does this stuff. So just the eye that she put even to a documentary was great. And then I think her final film was that A Wrinkle in Time, which I think was made more for women and girls. So I wasn't naturally necessarily attracted to it. And that movie ended up being a movie that was for the first time a black female director was involved in a movie that at least earned $100 million. So you'd had black directors before, right? But their movies didn't go to this level because they didn't have the kind of bank backing it to where it could get that kind of notoriety or being seen. So she's been nominated several times. Ava DuVernay gets cinema. She gets cinematography. She gets story. And then she doesn't seem to get in the way of good scripts. When someone writes for a good script, she doesn't seem like she interferes too much. She's ready to go. And in fact, she was first looked at by Disney to do Black Panther. And then they decided it wouldn't be a good fit, which I agree, because she would have made it more serious. And Ryan Coogler who eventually became the incumbent to shoot the film, was more in line with what Disney Marvel was doing. So I'm glad that she didn't do Black Panther, just because she would have made an awesome Black Panther movie, but it wouldn't have fit with the other Marvel films in terms of where they were going with it. And one day I think she should do Black Panther. I'd love to see how she would tell that story. But Ava DuVernay she's special. She's special juice for sure. Yeah. What do you think, Kazak?
No, I mean absolutely. Like I said, for Disney to put the trust in her to do A Wrinkle in Time speaks volumes for her work. You know, bright colors, things that I like, and again, the performances in Selma, you know, breathtaking. I mean, you're getting that really impactful telling of the Martin Luther King story. It's just it's nice to see her coming up because, like I said, there's so much artistic work there and the great eye to get her where she's going. And like I said, I think that you're going to continue to see trust in what she's doing, man. And that's a really important thing in today's Hollywood, man.
Yeah, I think so, and I think she's making that. Making a charge for it, so I think that's good because that's what I want to see. I don't want us to have to name like 5 guys every time as the best directors.
Right.
Like we can't keep saying Spielberg and Lucas and Scorsese and De Palma and stuff like that. We have to at some point be able to see when we say best movies or best directors. We should be able to see a big spectrum here because everybody's got a story to tell, and that's what movies are, right?
Sure.
Just moving pictures about a story. So, so let's get into now, since we're talking about films, let's get into our favorite black films or films made by black directors, leading men for sure, or leading women. And we'll again start with you, Johnny. So in terms of black film, and let me see if I can frame it as well. These films can be films that were just influential to you as well. They don't have to just be, oh, I like this one time, you know. And if you have an honorable mention, that's fine. We'll talk about that as well. But
I think we're just gonna be able to do the one film because we're kind of running low on time. So.
okay, that sounds great to me. Thank you, sir. So give us your film, man.
So for me, it's Sorry to Bother You.
Oh,
That's it. It's phenomenal. So I'm going to juxtapose it a little bit
okay,
with Fight Club.
okay,
There's a lot of similarities there, but what I find interesting about the 2 main characters in the films is in Fight Club, it's trying to conform until you just can't take it anymore and you have to break free, right? He's buying everything that he's told to, right, for all of his life, and he thinks his life is perfect, but nothing's going well. Whereas with Sorry to Bother You, you've got this black perspective of wanting to fit in, of not being in, and then once he gets in, realizes it's a trap, right? So it's very, very interesting the difference in the starting perspective, telling a very similar story of frustration and struggle in life, and the humor in this film is just listening to both of you talking about some of the previous, some of the early black films and the way that humor is used. This one just nails it for me. There's subtlety and there's really, really overt humor. Absolute favorite moment is talking about learning your white voice to make sales.
okay.
And that's just, it's hilarious. It's hilarious.
Boots Riley, right? It's the
Yes,
director.
Boots Riley.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't agree with him politically on a lot of things, but God, the guy's brilliant. I have to give him credit for it. It's phenomenal.
Okay, yeah, and it also stars Lakeith Stanfield, who was in the Judas and the Black Messiah, and this guy is an actor you need to be paying attention to because I think he's got the chops.
He's brilliant. He's brilliant in this film. Absolutely.
Yeah, how about that? How about you, KZ?
All right, so for me, I chose not necessarily a favorite film, but I chose a film that I wanted to learn more about because of its legendary status.
Okay.
And the film that I chose was Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song, 1971.
Yeah, you
by
went way
Melvin
back.
Van Peebles. Yeah, because, like I said, when we talk about the actors pulling themselves by their bootstraps, Melvin did it because he wrote direct, compose the music, and distributed the film all himself. And I mean, the film, like I said, I'm going to say this outright: the film does not age well.
Okay.
The film is problematic.
Okay.
It starts out, with it literally starts out with a statutory rape right at the top. It's
Wow.
It's an X-rated film, but it's important for the history because, like I said, you have a guy who basically doesn't know music and writes the music. You have there's no one who's going to give him money to make this. There's no studio that's going to give him money to make this film, so he gets the money himself, including a loan from Bill Cosby.
Wow.
He writes and directs and makes this film that basically starts an avalanche of films from it because studios owned by white guys see the prospect of making money on these low-budget films. And like I said, the film goes on to make $15 million, which by today's standards would be $90 million. And I mean, it goes from being a film that shows in like 2 screens on 2 theaters and just gets massive support, and it becomes one of the most influential films because again, you've got guys like Huey P. Newton, endorsing the films and things like that because it is the tale of a guy who basically will not take it from the man anymore. And I mean, it is not a blaxploitation film, but it is the film that starts the blaxploitation market because without it, you don't get films like Dolomite, you don't get films like Shaft, you don't get films like Coffee, Foxy Brown. You basically get this. You basically get this film that basically kickstarts a whole revolution in film. And again, like I said, it's like if I can get this film made, you can get this film made. And again, like I said, it's not a great film, but it's great for the history because it's got a great soundtrack. It's almost like a jazz poem, but again, it is just it's remarkable in the fact that it's not a great story, but it is remarkable for the history because again, it is kind of the story of how an independent filmmaker can get things made. And again, like I said, you get his son Mario Van Peebles, who creates New Jack City and Posse and things like that. And of course, the story Badass, which is about the making of this film. Like I said, the film itself is problematic, but the film itself is important for its history.
Wow.
And like I said, it's an X-rated film, and the tagline was rated X by an all-white jury, and it basically it honestly tells you kind of like I said. This is what happens when you can't take it from the man anymore. And again, just to show you what kind of hustler he was, there's a lot of unsimulated sex. There is non-simulated sex in this film. He actually contracted gonorrhea during the making of this film, filed for workman's comp, and used the money to buy more film to get this film. That's what kind of hustler he is.
Wow.
Just telling you the story.
True to the game, I guess, right?
Anyway, that's one of the that's that.
Well, this is difficult, and that's difficult. Yeah, this is difficult when you say, for myself, what's a super influential black film for you? And doing some research, of course, I feel like The Blood of Jesus was an excellent film by William Spencer back in those early days with Oscar Micheaux that actually got cataloged by the Congress of real film, I guess, and it's only one of the few films from that era that did that. But I had to go with something that I've seen because I never saw The Blood of Jesus. That movie came out way, way before my time, for sure. But the movie that did mean a lot to me was Spike Lee's film Malcolm X, because Malcolm X is a very interesting and intriguing character all the way around. There's so many different pieces to his life that make so much sense. And so this film in 1992, Spike Lee came out with this, and you have Denzel Washington. Once again, if you can get Denzel Washington to carry the weight of the film, then that's incredible. And you had, Delroy Lindo, you had Albert Hall, Angela Bassett. These are some other star-studded folks that are in the film as well. But Denzel, right? So first of all, one of the first things you notice is Denzel Washington does not look like Malcolm X at all. Right? Malcolm X was lighter skinned like me with freckles and some red hair, and Denzel's not at all. But when you listen to Denzel with those glasses on and the suit and wearing and dressed in the tone and the cadence in his voice, you think it's Malcolm X. And in fact, what's funny is somebody did a tattoo of Malcolm X. They wanted to show that they were a big Malcolm X fan, and they didn't realize that that's Denzel Washington, not Malcolm X. You used the wrong picture there, bro, if you wanted it to be Malcolm X. But that just goes to show you how convincing Denzel Washington was playing this titular figure at that time in the 60s, right, in Malcolm X. And so this movie was wonderful. It's a 3-hour movie. It's the only 3-hour movie that I can watch that does not feel like 3 hours, because they do show you his pre-days, the Nation of Islam, and they show the post. And they show his voyage to Mecca, which changed his whole mind about how he was seeing how race and religion had been pimped together, and some things were going on with that in terms of what he was learning. And then just the corruptness that he started to see also inside Nation of Islam there. And so this was an interesting tell, because this he was smart enough, Spike Lee, to take the screenplay mostly from the book written by Alex Haley, who wrote Roots, about the autobiography of Malcolm X. And so there's a lot of contention, even to this day, how Malcolm X died. Was it the Nation of Islam? Was it the FBI, because Hoover was watching him? Or was it both of them together, because they both didn't want him around, right? And so this very day, there's still different stories about what happened in the Audubon Ballroom in '65 when he was shot giving a speech when there were no officers out front. A figure like this, no officers out front. So it's almost as if people were allowed to just come in and do what they did, and they had their signal, and then it happened, and then all of a sudden, then the police come running after this guy shot. But what's great about it is you get to see where this comes from. Where does this anger and this hatred come from? And so when you see the very first part, where his mother's put in a insane asylum because they said she was just too crazy, and then they told him that his dad was hit by a train, but really he was killed by the KKK, and they threw him in front of a train. But they said, no, your dad got killed by a train. So you can see where his anger is. And then him as a young student, they're showing him as a student where he wants to get higher in his education, what he can learn, and his teacher's telling him, no, that's not, niggers don't, you need to be a janitor. You don't need to be trying to be a lawyer and all that stuff. So you get sense where this person is built. And then he gets into the petty crime like you would expect, because low means, nobody's there. So then he ends up in the prison system. But that's when he finds the Nation of Islam, because they come in doing their ministry retreats and that sort of thing. And so to me, there's several parts of this film. I could talk about this film forever. I just love this film. But there's this piece where he's sitting there in jail. And Denzel has several great scenes in this, not just one. But in this piece, this Nation of Islam guy is talking to him. And he just says, brother, you just need to believe. You can't be slicking your hair and going and selling drugs and doing all that stuff. You're bringing black people down, right? And he's saying all this stuff. You just open up to Allah, he's trying to tell him. And I love it because Denzel's sitting there, and they back the screen up. And you just see the silhouette of this taller man and this one man on his knees because he's broken. He's in prison. Malcolm Little, his real name, is broken. And he says, Denzel says to him, he looks up to him, he says, the man tells him, he said, man, you just got to reach out. Reach out to Allah. He will save you. He will cover you. And he says, I want to. I just don't know how. And that's your scene, right? Because you're seeing how decadent he was before, but now he's about to make this really radical change from his 2-bit hustling and racketeering that he was doing to now he's going to become a man of a particular faith, and he lives it to the exact T, right? So Malcolm X, it's interesting, has children, and Martin Luther King Jr. is the good one, right? But he cheated on his wife. Malcolm X didn't. That's the kind of deal he had, that whenever you told him something and he believed that there was something good that could come out of it, he latched on to whatever you gave him because he was always looking for something better. So we phrased him as, and he's the bad black guy because he hated white people. And he was saying, no, he was talking against what was going on in the 60s. And the easiest way to gain black followers is to tell them, which this is where they went, was that the white people, you read about the devil in your holy book, but the devil are these people, because look at the devilish things that they're doing to you. So that was easy for black people to buy in the 60s and hear all that with everything going on. And so you could see why he could be radicalized and go there. And so the film shows you that. And then it shows you that, so they don't stop there. So you go, oh, what an ass, right? They show you what happens to him when he goes to Mecca, when he sees Muslims of every stripe bowing. And he's like, huh? Because I was told back in New York that, only, these people are the devils. Why are they in here, right? And you see him grapple with that, and then come back, and he's able to adjust his thinking, right? And so they say a lot that if you know the history of the civil rights in this, that Malcolm was moving more towards MLK, and MLK was moving more towards Malcolm, to an interesting point, because MLK was hated at the end of it. They didn't like what he was saying about the Vietnam War and all this other stuff, right? So everybody loves Martin Luther King Jr. because he the dream speech. Yeah, well, everybody didn't love him. They still hated him, and they hated him even worse when he did there. So this film lets you see, here he is as a kid, here he is as a bad guy, a thug who deserved to be in jail, right, for what he was doing. But you understand why he was in jail. And then how he wanted to change his life. He wanted a conversion. He wanted something better. He thought it was what these guys were telling him in jail with the Nation of Islam. Then he gets out. He starts to move forward, because there's some powerful messages that are spot on about Plymouth Rock. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us, right? And just stuff like that. And you were captivated by this. And then you get to the part where you say, okay, and this is how it should be, instead of that movie I was telling you about earlier where the person was hateful, that you want to root for this person. You see the change. He loved his wife. He loved his kids. Didn't cheat on them at all. And was able to walk away because he didn't like what he was seeing. The Nation of Islam is way, the great Elijah Muhammad was seen with all these extra concubines, if you will. And when he saw that, he was like, what? So he wasn't afraid to challenge even the things that saved him and pulled him out of prison. So you get a lot about this, and it's done by Denzel Washington's performances.
Yeah, and the film itself, because we were talking about Spike before we got started, and the fact that, like I said, the film is so eye-catching.
Yes,
because it goes from colorful to drab to bright to things like that.
It does.
And Spike's a great one to close out on, because, like I said, in addition to telling the story, he's got such an eye for color and an ear for jazz. I mean, it's remarkable to watch his films because they're so eye-catching. And this one in particular is just amazing to see visually.
Yes. You have to see it. And then also the story itself is one of the best, because, again, you'll get people who argue with you, no, he's a jerk the whole time, or no, he was the best because he was, I believe in Islam, and I believe, So you'll see these different radical views of a man who really is no different than any of us if we were put in some of the situations that he was in. The choices that he made seemed logical. But the difference was when he found his voice, because this is not a highly educated man. When he found his voice, he sounded like the most educated person in the room when he was able to put together and show you, hey, this is what's happening to you. This is how you can respond. Who told you that there was something wrong with black? Who told you there was something wrong with your nose? Who told you that you needed to straighten your hair to look more? Who told you, right? He got to that, right? And so when you see that, you're enthused. You're saying, I can get why people would latch onto that message, especially with what was going on at that time. And that he was the person that could speak and come in at the right time. He's done, you would see all kinds of things where he would do debates as well on college campuses with highly educated people. And he could hold his own. So fascinating man. If you haven't had a chance, I think this is a great movie. It's a great way, I guess, to end our episode, if you will, on Black History Month, because this guy made a big contribution just as much as Martin Luther King Jr. did. And I'd urge people who think negatively of him, you probably should watch this movie. While it doesn't have everything in it, it does have a lot, so you can get a sense of who this guy was and why he would say some of the things that he did say when he was believing the things that he did believe at some important time. So that's Black History Month, the shortest month out of all the months. And this episode here, we didn't have as much, if you will, in terms of a lot of production value, because we wanted to just tell the stories. We wanted to let you know what was great out there. So that's what we did there. So with that vein, let's jump into shout-outs. So what are we shouting out? Who are you shouting out, Johnny?
I have no shout-outs for myself today. Sorry.
Yeah, well, that's fine. It's all good. How about you, K-Zach?
Shout-outs to our Talking Ready to Me Sunday companion Cole. He'll be bringing back the Rancor Pit. Should be, I believe, next Sunday right here in DallasOnAir.com. And, of course, check out everything cool here on the station, including Best for Business, including 12-Pack, including the Petty Podcast. And like I said, we'll be back here on second and fourth Sundays. And like I said, alternate with Cold for Isle of Toys and Redcord Pit on first and third Sundays. We're here in DallasOnAir.com. And of course, shout outs to Jansen and Kat for giving us a home here every week.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to give my shouts to Brandy and Barry Austin. They're big movie fans. Sean Presley, Lauren Wiedauer, Tristan Frazier, Harry Thomas, Troy Ross, Michael Paul, Mad Mel, Daniel Mesa, also to the Film Samurai out there, Eddie Medina, Stephanie Crane, and of course Scott Laney and Sandra up there in Indiana.
Yeah,
so
check out Aiden Colleen's new show, Fan and Wife, right here in DallasOnAir.com too, and of course Figment's Young Swing Mysteries podcast. Shout outs to them for sure.
absolutely all day long. Well, that's us. That's our show for today. We will see you guys again March 14th. And we'll get into our whole spring lineup of things. And so stay tuned, be ready, and we'll have it for you. And until then, we're out.
That's it.
That's it.